Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Tiki here.
And Blue Dragon 5.
In honor of Black History Month, we thought we'd pay tribute and showcase the great defining black characters the world has come to love.
This year we're doing something brand new. Instead of talking fictional black heroes on the page and screen, we've decided to celebrate the real-life heroes that make the things we love on the page and screen possible. Each of the four prolific icons a titan in their respective field.
So without further delay, let's explore the history of Marc Bernardin, the writer, on Black History Heroes. Alright, Dragon, we are back, and you know what? We got through the whole last Black History Heroes without referencing the fact that, we are indeed the whitest men on the internet. Say it with me, people. We do like to explore this kind of stuff just from a cultural point of view, but by no means are we experts in it. So just want to put that disclaimer up front.
We're as white as David Hyde Pierce skiing. Yeah, that's as white as it gets.
So, Dragon, let's get into Marc Bernardin. Of course, most of you, when you hear the name Marc Bernardin, I certainly fall into this camp. I think of Kevin Smith. I think of Batman on Batman. I think of, essentially the large, overweight, but lovable teddy bear of a man that is the Robin to Kevin Smith's Batman. And Dragon, my God, he's got such a prolific career that I don't even know where to start with it, dude. It's this is a guy who's kind of treaded a lot of new ground in the industry when it comes to journalism and when it comes to comics.
Absolutely. Yeah. My introduction to Bernardin was, he was. Obviously, it was through Fat Man on Batman. I was there pretty much not from the very beginning of Fat Man on Batman, the inaugural years. It was Fat Man on Batman dates back to I want to say 2012, maybe end of 2011, at least going back to 2012.
He was doing standalone interviews with Batman people before yes. Bernardin came in, right?
Exactly. So basically, that was kind of that was the turning point. So roughly not episode 13, but it was down the line. The point it was at the earliest it could have been episode 13. The point being, there was a time where Kevin Smith was doing commentaries, and the first commentary on Fat Man on Batman was Dark Knight Returns, the animated movie, hence the 2012 of it all. You had the first part, and then you had the second part coming out, top of next year, I guess. So that was my introduction to him. Just he just kind of brought in someone to do a commentary with, and then just kind of Bernard just kind of kept popping up, to the point where he became a staple, to the point where he then became a co-host. And that's the thing. I mean, Marc Bernardin, to me, he's very much on that podcast. He's the news guy because of his journalistic background. He brings the news, and more importantly, I think he brings the analytical half to balance out Kevin Smith. Because Kevin Smith's all about the love of the industry. He's all about he's all about the love of a fan. And yeah, Bernard, who also has the love of the fan, but he's also bringing the thought, the implications. He's he's the guy who's seen behind the curtain. He knows how it goes, and he's kind of lending thoughts and feelings on the matter. And we see him as this remarkably clever writer and speculator that he is. He just brings so much wisdom from the inside, I feel. I love him to pieces. I love Marc Bernardin quite a great deal.
All right, so Dragon, let's get started here. Where do you want to go? Legacy? What is a legacy?
Would you please stop making that?
Never. All right. So you know the man a little better than I do, Dragon. So what is Marc Bernardin's legacy?
All right. Okay, so just kind of a few of the big claims to fame on good old Marc Bernardin. So one just to kind of hit off right at the bat, the man has a very vast career in journalism. We can't really speak. We haven't read every article the man's done, but
I do definitely remember him when he was on Entertainment Weekly, though. That's the one piece of journalistic media where I definitely remember seeing his name pop up.
Yeah, that for sure, I think is his biggest staple, the Entertainment Weekly. I think it's one he worked longest on. He kind of
Mhm.
built there to a point. But he's done a whole lot. We'll cover a little bit later on what exactly he's done within the vast, kind of journalistic catalog. But the point being, Mark Bernard very much a news hound, so a news hound in in the journalism circle. Best work probably with Entertainment Weekly. So he also, hence the transition here. I can't say he was necessarily the first person to do this, but he was one of the earliest media presence at San Diego Comic Con. He was the one who said, "Hey, why don't we cover San Diego Comic Con to Entertainment Weekly or whoever he was with at the time?"
Now you see that to me is huge. Like that to me, it's like he has that alone is almost like as big of a foothold into the geek culture industry at large as Kevin Smith has in regards to like, you know what, we can talk about this for hours and people would listen to us talk about this for hours.
Yeah, yeah. So like, the big thing there's kind of the sad truth. So Mark Bernard, here's the thing. I can only say, see, by the time he was there and he had that idea, that was like by the third San Diego Comic Con. I want to say by the third one, it's still like in a hotel at that point. So it's really early on, and it's like starting to grow. It's like slowly but surely starting to grow. It's like like maybe at most at that time it could have been 4,000. Where now it's like it's bazillion. Well, at least, well, not now, but it was like to a
Now,
bazillion.
what year was this? Around what time?
Let's see. God. Let's see. So this would have Bernard's been. That's what I'm saying. This is like the third. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the dates here. It probably would have been the 80s, I
Okay.
imagine. I could be wrong. It's like I forget how long San Diego Comic Con's out. I forget if San Diego Comic Con's been around for. Yeah, it might have been around for 50 years, given the 70s as well.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
No, but seriously, I forget if San Diego had like its 50th anniversary at some point. So implication being Mark Van Oren's a kid, essentially a kid of the 70s, and by the time he's a journalist, it would be in the 80s. So it's probably like around that point, I imagine.
Gotcha.
Like I believe San Diego Comic Con, it wasn't always a yearly thing. It became a yearly thing, but it might have been like a little bit more like kind of like every 5 years or so. I could be wrong on that, but the point being, so that I'm unsure of. Like he was the guy who necessarily started like told Sci-Fi whoever he was working for at that time, like, hey, let's cover the Comic Con. But once that happened, he did have a big claim to fame, and he's the one who they throw a big party for all the journals, like all the magazines. They team up for a party. He's the guy who said, like, "Hey guys, we're all down here. Let's just band our parties together and just do one awesome giant party." And now, for like an annual thing, every time you go down there for like 8 years at least in a row, there was like this giant media party of all the fancy, L.A. parties they would have. And now Mark Bernard, now he's not with the magazines anymore, like exclusively. He can't get into those parties that
Oh
he
God.
started, which is so sad, you know? Okay, here's a huge claim to fame, especially in the Black History Bill. So Mark Bernard, he had a hand in creating Miles Morales. Pretty big hand, too.
Yeah. Now, first of all, I did not know that Donald Glover has been around this long. I really didn't, honestly.
Really?
No, When I think Donald Glover, I think like 2010s. That's when his career really popped off.
Well, that's when this is, Tiki.
No, Miles Morales must have predated 2010s.
Not really.
No, really? I
Okay,
could
so
have
let
sworn
me.
I could have sworn Miles Morales was like a 2000s thing.
Nope.
Oh dear God, I am
Okay.
fucking stupid then. I am
Tiki.
sorry.
No, no. 2000s is like that's when Ultimate Spider-Man happens, Tiki.
I am totally thinking of Ultimate Spider-Man and
Yeah.
not Miles Morales. I am so sorry.
Okay,
I am a
let me
fucking dumbass.
if you'll allow me to connect your dots there, buddy. Okay, so
Okay, my bad.
here's what actually so basically by the time they're casting for the Amazing Spider-Man movie, so again we're looking for a new Spider-Man. Mark Bernard writes an article saying like, hey, what if we made Peter Parker black? Like, what if we changed it up a little bit? Because again, the old philosophy being anyone could be under the mask. Therefore, like, why don't we change it up? So he wrote this article, and it got a lot of buzz. And he threw out like Donald Glover. It's like that's the guy I would cast as Spider-Man. And
I assume at that point Donald Glover was like mostly known for Childish Gambino, right?
Well, at this point, it was Community. I mean, that could be. I'm not
Oh
familiar.
wow, I keep forgetting that he was on Community. My bad. That's clearly where people knew him from.
So all
Okay.
this buzz led to the bit in Community where he's wearing the Spider-Man pajamas, which also led to the traction. So that inspired the Spider-Man pajamas bit because Donald Glover, I believe, was also a Spider-Man fan. Regardless, so it gets all this traction, all this buzz. Also lands Bernard a few death threats from some some ill-thinking people around the internet.
Yeah, those people can go fuck off,
that
honestly.
that they can, but the thing is, so this gets a lot of traction, gets a lot of thoughts, and in the tomes of Marvel, Brian Michael Bendis, who started Ultimate Spider-Man way back when, he's thinking about writing Peter Parker out, I guess, and he comes up with the idea of, okay, well, I'm kind of ending this story, and he Brian Michael Bendis has he has 4 kids, and 2 of them are adopted children who are black, and I kind of gave him a light bulb of like, I want someone my kids can kind of like kind of aspire to, or my kids can kind of connect to, like and with one of the biggest names in superhero-dom. So why don't I kind of take this Donald Glover Spider-Man idea and let's make a new character. Let's make Miles Morales and have him take over for Spider-Man the Ultimate books, which would be the perfect niche to introduce this kid. So transitive property, Marc Bernardin created Miles Morales. Crazy, right?
Yeah, that's crazy. That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, that definitely gives it like that is definitely in the Hall of Fame of superhero creations right there. And God, Dragon again. I'm sorry, it's crazy to think that Miles Morales is like within a decade of being created because to me, like he just fits so well into the Spider-Man mythos that it seems like he's always been there.
Miles Morales was either 2011 or 2014, if I'm remembering.
Uh-huh.
It would either be before Amazing Spider-Man or after Amazing Spider-Man. That's when that happens.
Gotcha. So, I mean, that just speaks to how good the character is, though, right? Where,
Absolutely.
when I think Spider-Man, I don't equally think Miles Morales, but Miles Morales definitely pops in my mind. He's up there. He is in the ether of great Spider-Man.
Absolutely. I mean, Miles Morales he's taken off like lightning, especially after Into the Spider-Verse. Now Miles Morales is introduced to the layman perfectly with that film. So everyone knows Miles Morales. Everyone, their mother now knows about. Oh, so there's another Spider-Man, one in kind of the black and red costume. Okay, I get it now. Yeah. So a few other claims to fame. Last 2, I suppose. 2018, he won the Inkpot Award, which is a really coveted award. I want to say it's awarded at Comic-Con. I'm pretty sure it's awarded at the San Diego Comic-Con, which is appropriate given his kind of contribution to that as well. Which essentially he's awarded for contributions to the industry at large, whether it be sci-fi, comics, film, television, just again pretty much everything celebrated at the Comic-Con, and it's a really prestigious honor. And I believe Kevin Smith also has one, but Marc Bernardin got one. It's really nice. It's you got that. And the last most current thing, the kind of big claim to fame of recent years, of last year, I should say, the Plague Nerdalogs. Did you look into this at all? Just out of curiosity?
I mean, I could pretty much get the gist of what it was, but tell me more about it.
Yeah, the Plague Nerdalogs. This was Marc Bernardin's way of helping during the quarantine, during the lockdown, especially, because he basically he raised money for charities. It was kind of he raised money for a lot of charities. Where basically he's got a lot of friends in the industry after his storied career, and he through Kevin Smith as well. Like they know a lot of people. They've interviewed a lot of people. So basically, they reached out to everyone, and Marc Bernardin has kind of led this charge of like take. Let's contact our celebrity friends and tell them, hey, any monologue from a movie or a TV show you would like to do. I think it's mainly movies, but any monologue you'd like to do from a movie of your favorite character, whatever, like the best monologue ever, do that monologue, and we'll put it on this thing. Essentially, initially, they did this the whole thing was like for charities, and people would pay for this, and the money would go to originally No Kids Go Hungry, the charity for that. And then later on that year, you had the Black Lives Matter thing. So basically, he raised $50,000 for Black Lives Matter, and it was kind of like, how can you make a change without doing a protest in the midst of the end times right now? Well, you do it digitally, do it online with all the celebrities doing something really positive. So helped a lot of people, raised a lot of money, and of course now is available for many more to see. And this is like Grant Gustin doing Steve Rogers' speech from the end of Civil War, stuff like that. Like Kevin Smith doing the Anton Ego speech from Ratatouille. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Right. Nice.
A lot of fun. They got like everyone in on the action. Lin-Manuel Miranda, Phil Lamar. The coolest one I think is Phil Lamar as Samurai Jack doing the Inigo Montoya speech. That's awesome. So there's a bunch of them like that. So the Plague Neurologs is like a really nice thing he did for the to kind of tie the industry at large into something nice for everyone. So he led the charge on that. So yay Bernardin. So yeah.
So it sounds like it came out a little bit better than the Gal Gadot Imagine video.
Yeah, it's like the version of that. That's essentially what that. It's like what if that's this? Like what if it actually led to positive change and celebrities helping out for a change?
All right. Sorry, Gal, love you, but
yeah, I don't. I think she got a little undue hate on that, but that's what it is, I guess.
All right. So yeah, let's switch gears to the beginnings Dragon, the origin story, if you will.
Bernardin begins.
So it starts, famous superhero origin story Dragon. He was a kid from the Bronx.
Yes, I love that Marc Bernardin's like a New York kid. He's a New Yorker at heart, which kind of makes his ties to Spider-Man and everything. And he was a Marvel kid too. It's really nice. He had like these great. It makes sense given he was a New Yorker. You got to imagine so many New York kids got to be Marvel fans at the end of the day. Because how can you not be? Because it's superheroes in your backyard. So Marc Bernardin is a little parentage thing on Marc Bernardin, which is interesting. His father is from Haiti.
Oh, okay.
His father's from Haiti. His mother, I believe, is stateside, but her family begins from Barbados. So yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So again, pretty much New Yorker for the majority of his life. He's kind of a kid in New York in an apartment in the Bronx to eventually get in his own apartment in Queens. And when he gets married, he goes to Jersey. And once he's in the industry, he goes to LA. So it's kind of a little star chart there.
All right, so pretty much had the standard '70s indoctrination into pop culture with stuff like Marvel, Star Wars, Godzilla, Kung Fu.
Yeah, like he comes up like because he was before Star Wars. He was before A New Hope, so he's like coming up like probably it's the tail end of the '60s. I imagine he's 12 years old when he's like 12 or 13 when he sees Star Wars. I'm imagining it's like the late '60s or what have you. And so he gets into pop culture around that age, and of course the big Marvel story for him appropriately is Secret Wars, the big event of its era, and Star Wars. So I like that. If you look at Marc Bernardin's career, he is really rooted in sci-fi, and I love that both in comic and film, like two huge sci-fi kind of like we're taking the heroes into space and we're learning about space heroes at the same time. It kind of creates a Star Trek for all the sci-fi things he'd have hands in, the whole Battlestar Galactic cast of it all, years later, and around this time he's becoming a fan of like the kung fu craze of the '70s and Godzilla and Kiss and you name it. So Bernardin very much that's kind of what's flavoring his taste at this point.
All right. So let's see. He went to he won a prestigious writing contest, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah, this is really cool. So Bernardin, just in life, his father, again, very much being, I want to say kind of the immigrant story, again, the guy from Haiti, essentially. He very much wanted his son to take up a practical trade. He wanted him to become an accountant because it's safe work. I mean, you get it. And Bernardin, he wants to do architecture initially, and then he kind of moves into advertising. Unfortunately, advertising requires math, which terrifies all of us, including Bernardin. So
Bernardin, that is why I did not finish college, my friend.
So eventually he goes in for the communication arts. That's kind of what he takes up because his love of storytelling. So again, just kind of figuring story will kind of work its way into the communication arts, which eventually it did big time for him. So that worked out like gangbusters. And essentially, he enters. There was a television network, Ubu, UBU. So I guess it's Ubu for short. Every time I hear Ubu, I'm thinking of Ubu from Batman the Animated Series.
God.
You must forgive Ubu, detective. He is well trained. Anyway, so Ubu, this TV network, they have a writing contest for students at the college. And essentially, the premise is students will write a spec script for whatever show they'd like, maybe their favorite shows, to write a spec script for an existing show. And if you win, you're going to win a summer in LA interning on one of those shows. And here's the best part I didn't tell you about, Tiki. The best part is there'd be a mystery show that you would get to work on later as well, but a mystery show they wouldn't tell you. So there's one of their shows and a mystery show down the line, and you can guess who won that contest. Marc Bernardin. So he gets one of the Ubu shows, kind of lost to the ages, if you will. But the mystery show though, the mystery show was Star Trek because he turned in a Star Trek spec script. And they really liked it, so it's like, hey, let's get him in on Star Trek: The Next Generation, which is really big at this time. Probably kind of getting into the 80s, the 90s period, I imagine. Yeah. And that's kind of when that really launches his career in many respects. Now, I'm sorry, before we go just launch into the career, I just want to talk about kind of the man in general.
Go for it.
So Marc Bernardin always. I get a sense that Marc Bernardin's seen a lot of stuff, just in regards to the black experience, and that it always interests me that Bernardin, he's always kind of been the wise Solomon on the matter in that regard. And he always seems to internalize what he's witnessed, and he's channeled a lot of that into his writing. I really kind of see that in his style, especially with some of the stuff we're going to be talking about later, like Genius. Mm-hmm. It seems like he's seen some stuff. He's the man's well informed. He's aware of the changing times through the '70s onward. Within all that, and I like that he's kind of. He's also kind of trying to educate the next generation as well. He has a really close relationship with his family, from what I understand. He and his son and his daughter, he's tried to enlighten his son on things, and it's really cute though. I've heard in quarantine, Bernardin, he and his son did this burger a day challenge where they would have a different burger a day, and they'd kind of share and watch stuff together. It's sounds really cute. Nice, Bernardin gives. I get the impression Bernardin's a really good father. There's that, and of course there's also his daughter Sophie, who she's on the spectrum, and I imagine that requires a lot of patience, a lot of perspective it's given him, and it's kind of manifest as well in his work. So that's really kind of nice.
Yeah, much respect for that, of course. Yeah. All right, so let's see. So then after Star Trek, it looks like so Starlog magazine, Dragon, is that kind of what parlayed him into the journalistic world?
Absolutely. So what happened here, basically the way we're going to break this down, folks, is the many shades, Bernardin's like a Rubik's Cube, man, the many sides of Marc Bernardin. So we're going to start with, he's a Rubik's Cube in pants.
Dragon, strap on, hold on to your hats. This is going to be a 10-hour podcast talking about every article that Marc Bernardin's ever written. All right.
Not that many squares, but sure.
But go ahead, sorry.
So let's start with Marc Bernardin, the intern.
Uh-huh.
So he's interning on Star Trek, and that's basically by the end of Next Generation, he gets on some of the spin-offs like Deep Space Nine and stuff like that. So at the end of his Star Trek interning career, and importantly, he learns the ropes. He sees behind the curtain. He learns how the business is done. He's been inside a writer's room, so that's big. That helps him a lot.
Yeah.
In the aftermath, once his kind of a time on the Enterprise ends, so to speak, he's interviewed by Starlog magazine because he was involved in Star Trek, which Starlog really liked to punch in on. They love Star Trek.
I would think so, given the name.
And that gave him the big light bulb of journalism because he had such a great time. I imagine he might have kind of cultivated maybe a bit of friendship perhaps with those guys, and they kind of gave him a light bulb hey, why don't I pursue journalism? I like to write. I want a writing contest. I've been in the business. I have a little bit of a perspective. I could talk pop culture once I get into the film editor thing. And so he. So that kind of brings us to the next phase of Bernardin's career, the Marc the Reporter.
Yeah, so this is kind of him just getting his, his credentials, essentially, with, just goddamn, just you name it, he's worked on it. Entertainment Weekly, Sci-Fi Wire, Playboy, Vulture, Hollywood Reporter. God, those are some of the biggest names in the industry of entertainment journalism.
Again, there's Empire and Wired too. It's a whole bunch, and Screen Rant. He's been all over the place, and that's the thing. We're doing this all in the wrong order with terms of all these magazines. I can't quite pinpoint it, but what I want to highlight though is that there's a change in the status quo for some of these magazines over time. Where the magazines go digital at a point where that kind of fills in kind of that storied career there for you. He's seen the transition, guys. He's been in the trenches.
He's essentially the Ben Urich.
Yes, absolutely. That's perfect. Yes, he's the Ben.
Dragon cast Marc Bernardin as Ben Urich.
What's funny? I'm going to mention this now because you reminded me of it. Okay, you know who I've always thought who could play Marc Bernardin?
Ooh.
Mr. Poe from the series of unfortunate events.
Yeah, I could see it. I could totally see it.
Because that guy, every time I watch that show, it was like, if Marc Bernardin were not smart, he would be that guy.
Right.
Because that's him. Anyway, but yes, that's what I'm saying. I like that he's kind of seen the shift there, and again, in all this time, he's made friends in the industry. He's made a lot of good impressions. He pretty much becomes the journalistic Kevin Smith within his time, and in the field, so to speak. He's done some interviews. He's left again the good impressions. The implication to me, and of course I haven't read all his work. I've read a few of his articles. I've been really impressed by them. He seems to be a very fair journalist. Like, he's not going to do like a smash piece or like a puff piece. Like, he's just going to tell it as it is. But what I've gleaned from his writing style to me is that he uses. I read his Cars review from way back in '06, and he uses like personal anecdotes to facilitate his opinions on the films. At least that's how he used to do it. And again, the whole Miles Morales thing, obviously, he shared what he would like to see. So he's really he brings the everyman quality into the writing. And of course, the film editor thing definitely helps with like being a fan of all the stuff in pop culture and the Star Wars movies and so on and so forth. So it really definitely everything is it's tracking on the road and the trajectory of Marc Bernardin in a sense,
Gotcha.
Like, he would have made an excellent teacher in many respects on how well to connect your ideas. Just given like how he's just kind of taking these anecdotes and putting them into like these opinions. He'd be a perfect teacher. It's kind of
I really feel like that's what separates the men from the boys when it comes to journalism, Dragon. It really is. Like, that's that's where you get your personal touch. If you can get like a style that people connect to it. Like obviously I'm going to use like a pretty direct comparison here, but let's say like a Roger Ebert. Roger Ebert, honestly, Dragon, half the time that dude's opinions were shit, in all honesty. But still, it's the way he wrote. It's the way that he connected his love of filmmaking and, like had all these little antidotes and equations. That's what makes Ebert iconic. It's not actually Ebert's take on things, which, like I said, a lot of the time, Ebert's take on things were frankly kind of weird.
Yep. That they were. And that's the thing. Honestly, he just hit it so perfectly. I didn't think about the comparison. That he is so much. He's Ben Urich. That's kind of like the perfect thing. In life, he became Ben Urich. It's like, again, like we're all like he's just kind of like the world has kind of been the Karen Page figure. He's kind of these talking. He's the mentor.
The world is his Karen Page.
In a sense, it's like we're turning the Karen Pages of the world here.
Oh God! Wow.
Changing hearts again. He's kind of changed hearts and minds. Again, he's had like a big impact on all these people that he's met. Because again, he's been the fair reporter. He's like, all right. So speaking of which, Entertainment Weekly being like the kind of the biggest love affair within kind of like all the papers and all kind of the outlets that he's been with. It
seems. Entertainment Weekly is just the best, right?
Well,
I've had a long-standing love affair with Entertainment Weekly.
Yeah, here's the thing. Back, and again, I stand by it for historically with this, but I mean, Seth MacFarlane always got raked over the coals by Entertainment Weekly. So
I remember that. I like
to think Bernardin was not one of the harsh.
Bad season 1 and F, and I was like, what? It's not that bad, guys. It's like a C+. Come on.
So that's what I'm saying. Entertainment Weekly always had it out for Seth MacFarlane. I like to think Bernardin was not there for that. He was I like to think Bernardin was mainly on the film side of things. Therefore, he didn't critique television.
Yeah, screw you, Seth.
Yeah, but that's it. But again, just even if that were the case, Bernard doesn't hold anything back. I mean, I can't fault him for again being good at his job. But still, by the same token, those Entertainment Weekly guys, they could be.
I'm curious if Bernardin wrote any of those reviews.
But again, given that he was the film editor on a lot of this, I don't think he did.
Okay.
I'd like to at least in my heart, I was like, no, Mark, please, no. That was when it was good. No. Right. No, but seriously, he is kind of again like the Ben Urich in that he's kind of the wise man in the cubicle, so to speak. He's been there. All right.
Yeah.
He's putting he's pinning up the cards on the board and everything. That's anyway. So, speaking of which, that transitions us to Marc Bernardin, the comic book writer. So, as we mentioned, he was on the con scene. So, whether he started or not, he was there very early on, kind of the coverage of San Diego Comic-Con, there for many years, and. he was kind of there in the infancy of things, so therefore he gets to know a lot of comic writers and artists and editors and guys from both sides, and like the bigwigs, the guys from both Marvel, DC, and the independents.
Mm-hmm.
So, and kind of getting to know him over the years, like basically they would say like, "Hey, Mark, you should write a comic. You love the stuff. We will vouch for you. You should ask this, write a book. You should put in for some stuff, man. Let's just you send them some work. Let's try to get you in on some of the books." And eventually, like, yeah, I should. I did. So at this point, Marc Bernardin's become a little more freelance with things. So he's got like the regular, like he would. This is why there's so many credits as well. There, if he didn't just like work steadily through all the papers and all the outlets, he would have like Entertainment Weekly is probably like an on-off thing, I imagine. Like for the most part, like he would be Entertainment Weekly to always come back to it, but for the most part, he would keep his options open. That would allow him to do like if Bernard had his way, he would be a comic book writer full time if he could, but that doesn't pay the bills, unfortunately. So that's broad strokes some of his work here.
Yeah, sure. So let's see. Highwaymen, I've heard of. You've compared it to like something like Lethal Weapon, right?
Yeah, it's very Lethal Weapon-esque. This is a DC book, not the main DC book, but it was like I think it was like an offshoot, like a Vertigo or something. Point being, it was work for DC. Now, what got this made is really funny. So Jim Lee is now the head honcho at DC. Jim Lee, the artist.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah. So at this point, when he goes to DC with the Highwaymen, basically Bernard.
I'm shameless Jim. I'm sorry, that's what I think of when I think of Jim Lee.
Anyway, so it's really funny how Highwaymen happen. So basically, Marc Bernardin, he's pestering again at the advice of, "Hey guys, do a book. He's like, okay, he's going to do a book. So he pesters Jim Lee with, "I'd like to have a meeting and pitch him some ideas," and basically for like I want to say like a year or so, he just kept pestering him almost every day. And Bernardin called himself out on it in like one last email because he kind of gets perspective and he realized, again, the smart man that Marc Bernardin is at a certain point, like his enthusiasm kind of overruns the logic part of his brain. It was like, you know what? What am I doing? I keep pestering the poor man. This is not the way, you ask for a job or you ask for like, work for one of the big two. So he basically sends like one last email to Jim Lee saying, "Look, I want to apologize for how I've been approaching you. That's wrong. I now see that essentially." And he says, like, "Look, this is my last appeal. If you'd like to talk ideas over coffee, if you're in town, by all means. But otherwise, hopefully, basically, it's a very effusive apology."
Uh-huh.
So he gets a response from Jim Lee saying, "I'm going to be in town in like 2 weeks. Let's do this." So
okay.
So it worked out. So they're having pitches, and he kind of pitches them a few ideas, and they gets the Highwayman, and just Jim Lee awesomely says, "Yeah, let's do that one." And he says, "Do we need to go through it?" "No, I'm the head of the company, Mark. We're going to do that one." It's like it's the instant green light.
Nice.
And again, pretty much Highwayman. It's a cool concept. Lethal Weapon, kind of like these old couriers, very kind of Riggs and Murtaugh-esque, like kind of aging an aging hitman, an aging getaway driver, essentially have to transport this girl who's kind of a walking biological weapon. It was kind of like the better version of that stupid Hobbs and Shaw movie, essentially.
Oh God. All right, let's see. Then he did. He did. I'm sorry. What's the one with the autistic girl?
Well, let's talk about that one later. We'll get to that.
Okay, my bad.
But let me
Genius though. Genius sounds really interesting.
Yeah, so Genius was with Image. So again, kind of a Jim Lee connect in a sense as well, because Jim Lee used to work for Image. So Genius is a really interesting book, more relevant now than it's ever been before. Where you have this smart girl, teen girl from South Central LA. It was done to the Top Cow imprint, by the way. So Image has like an imprint like DC has Vertigo. They have Top Cow, and basically this teen girl lost her family in a shootout with the LAPD, and she she basically wages a very calculated war on the LAPD for killing her parents.
Yeah, what's interesting about that to me, Dragon, is of course Judas and the Black Messiah is fresh in my head right now.
Of course.
And a lot of people are calling that like a very untraditional war movie, and I can't help but agree with them on that assessment. It's not a war movie in the traditional sense because, it doesn't take place during it doesn't take place on on a war battlefield, but if you watch that movie, you know what I mean. It's like there are moments where it very much feels like you and those characters are at war. It is a very tense movie, and so I kind of picture that sort of vibe with this.
It feels like this is going to be a weird kind of way of putting it, but it sounds like a very Stan Lee idea almost, in which Marc Bernardin is having a Stan Lee moment of asking
You're not
what.
wrong. That is a weird way to put it, but go ahead. I'm intrigued.
Here's what I'm going with this, is that Marc Bernardin always has like a Stan Lee question of, what if we subverted the stereotype and kind of made a compelling story from it here? Like, what if we took, like, okay, well, traditionally the sidekick, teen heroes are sidekicks, like they're Robin. Where, okay, what if the teen hero was the lead of the book, like with Spider-Man? What if we put a monster on the team, like with the Fantastic Four? Like in this case, what Marc Bernardin's doing is like, what if we just took this sad story that we see constantly, and what if we gave the faction credit? Like, what if this person was smart in how they approached vengeance? Like, what if we took the average shootout, but we actually gave it like sort of like there was something kind of behind it? Like what if like people actually knew what they were doing? What if like there was feelings were festered from this traumatic event that manifest themselves in an interesting way narratively?
Gotcha.
I hope I went somewhere with that. All right, just a few side notes here. Just, again, with DC, he also worked on Static from Static Shock.
Yeah, that's another, of course, iconic black superhero in the vein of Miles Morales. So,
yep. Yeah, the tragedy though is that so he got the last 2 issues of the Static book, and here's the thing: he was going to be given the next run of the book, like the next couple string of issues, like ongoing issues, would have been Marc Bernardin writing it.
But then canceled.
Yep. Canceled because the New 52 cared about readership, and of all their, hey, we got 52 titles. Can we maintain that? No.
Oh man, that fucking New 52, dude.
Yeah, it was a mess, my friend. It was a mess. Just a highlight.
Oh, I know. I was around.
Now, I want to highlight his Marvel work briefly, because he's mainly done some X-Men stuff. Not a lot, but he's done. He's kind of worked for Marvel, and he did the X-Men Origins Nightcrawler issue, which basically kind of, I forget if this was purely capitalizing on the X-Men Origins Wolverine of it all or not, but they did this. There's a series of like little origin pieces on the individual X-Men members, really well written stuff, and Marc Bernardin did the Nightcrawler story, which was really nice. I've been able to read that. Unfortunately, I couldn't read the one that sounds really awesome. He did this Wolverine story that is amazing. It's called Wolverine One Night Only. And this story, from what I've heard summarized, is a Wolverine, one night a year, Wolverine gets drunk, because he can't get drunk any other night of the year. He just drinks copiously just for the heck of it, but it won't do anything. It's like the Captain America thing. Just, the cellular structure won't work.
Yeah.
But there's this mutant that he seeks out once a year, and the mutant dampens his healing factor, and basically allows him to drink. And I assume something goes wrong this night. Probably Sabretooth gets in the mix somehow, and things go awry.
That's an intriguing premise.
Yeah, so it's like Wolverine just trying to have like a quiet night out of drinking, and with a mutant buddy who can dampen his powers, it just goes south. Sounds awesome. Unfortunately, it's hard to find. If you can't find it in a comic shop, you're gonna have to look digitally, which is annoying. But all right, so so Marc Bernardin is now making a mark in comics, which is impressing some people. Which brings us to Marc, the television writer.
Yeah, so I'm familiar with most of these shows, but I haven't really watched any of them. So of course the big one that I know is Picard. So Mr. Plinkett wasn't a fan. I don't know. I don't watch Star Trek, so for all I know, Bernardin did a fine job with that.
So, like I mentioned, Bernardin's freelancing at this point, and the comics that he's been reading in the interim have been really impressing people, along with, again, a lot of goodwill in the industry. Again, I imagine people that may have been interviewed for other works, these showrunners who've done other things, perhaps, they've like, oh, I remember that Bernardin guy, and he really impressed me with some stuff that he's done recently. Let's call him in. Let's see if we can get him on this. It's pretty much how it's gone. Again, pretty much kind of like the Peter Parker freelance photographer angle, so to speak. He's kind of come in on shows. Hasn't really been sticking around for a show entirely, but he's been working his magic. So, Alphas. So Alphas was the first show that he got, and that was with Zach Penn. Now Zach Penn was a writer on the early X-Men, the good X-Men movies from the early days, like X-Men 1 and X2. And he worked on some of the. He was one of the additional writers on Phase 1 of Marvel. Like he worked on Avengers, worked on the Incredible Hulk before Edward Norton got crazy. So Zach Penn's a good guy. And basically the Alpha is just. I'm just gonna give you the 1 sentence pitch on these shows, by the way.
Okay.
Alphas is superheroes in a strip mall, and this is during like the grounded era of superheroes. So it's kind of like we're calling them alphas instead of superheroes, pretty much.
Mm.
Yeah. The big claim to fame, though, biggest thing I think he's proud of, Castle Rock. Have you heard anything about Castle Rock?
That's a Stephen King one, right?
Yes, so that's
yeah.
Bernard has like a love of Stephen King.
It's like the Stephen King cinematic universe show. I haven't I haven't watched it, but I remember I was actually like low key kind of excited for it when it was coming out.
Yeah, I want to watch that show, but I know I don't have the stomach for Stephen King, so I don't think I can. So you hit it right on the head there. It's pretty much the cinematic universe in a small town, pretty much, of Castle Rock. And he was there for the first season. He wanted to be on season 2, but because they took so long deliberating, and again, because you need to put bread on the table, he had to go freelancing to the next job. And the reason Bernard was on that show is that, from what I understand, the lead character of that show is kind of a black nerdy lead. Therefore, they kind of thought Bernard's our guy for this. We got to get him in on this. We're a very white writers' room. We need someone who could help us here. So they called in the expert. They called him, like, 1, a good writer, and 2, like a guy who can probably relate to the lead, which would make things feel authentic and such. And this is where Bernard really kind of starts
they
carving.
Did get Andre from Black Nerd Comedy.
It might have been, well, no, it's not before his time, but I don't know. I guess not. I guess they couldn't afford him.
That guy's been online for a while, Dragon.
Oh, no, you're right. He has, yep.
Anyways.
All right, so let's see. Then there's Treadstone. Now, Treadstone, I know very little about. All I know about is it's the weird Jason Bourne spinoff where, from what I understand, they can't say Jason Bourne.
Can I just state for the record how much I don't like no disrespect to Marc Bernardin, of course. I know it's just a job, but I don't like the Jason Bourne franchise, Dragon. I've never been a fan of it.
Let me tell you, literally, the only thing I know about the Jason Bourne franchise.
Okay.
I think there's like one shot in one trailer where he's like jumping through a window. It looks kind of cool.
Oh God, I love that Dragon.
I guess he can fight. That's a second thing.
I guess he can fight. Yes.
It's like he can. I guess he can fight, and he jumped through that window that one time.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's all the investment I got on Jason Bourne. That's all I got. I can't even say for sure he jumped through that window once. Okay, I think he jumped through that window. There's a slimmest chance that could have been taken or something else. All I know is I love that window shot. I can never remember what it's from.
All right. Anyways, so yeah, we've established our ambivalence towards the Bourne franchise.
Right, so then there's Carnival Row. So again, Carnival Row and mainly Castle Rock is when Bernard's carving out the horror niche, where basically he's bringing back the rules of horror, which it's like we got to give rules to these things so they make sense, to invest in the world. And then Carnival Row is, by the way, the first time he's ever working on like a season not from the Upstart. He jumped in on season 2 of this show.
Oh, okay. Now, was this? I remember this. Was it Amazon?
Yes, it's an Amazon show.
I remember it being advertised. I kind of wanted to check it out. It was kind of my aesthetic, but I never got around to it.
I think it's still on. I don't know if it I don't know if it ended or not, but it was going to like season 3. I don't know if it ended at 3 or if it's still going. But yeah, it's an Amazon series. I don't know much about it. All I know is Bernardin at this point, he's really getting into the. I saw it's like a kind of I think it's like a magical sort of mix into like a carnival. I think is the idea. I'm not sure. Like a clip I saw once.
Yeah, that's a general idea. Yeah.
I saw like a fairy in it, so I'm assuming there's a fantasy element.
Kind of like a carnival with like a with like a Miss Peregrine's School for Gifted Youngsters vibe.
Or perhaps, pretty much. So that's the thing. So the big thing too with Bernard at this point is he's becoming known for his world building capabilities with a show like this, where Bernard's theory and how he's approaching things is come for the world, stay for the characters. That's kind of the credo he's kind of been living by. So I love the credos of Marc Bernardin like that. Like, come for the world, stay for the characters. Again, this is a guy who grew up with Star Wars. This is a man who kind of studied at the feet of Joseph Campbell, within basically using Star Wars as his Joseph Campbell example of like the hero's journey per se. And he's always kind of used that to his advantage, I felt, which of course brings him to stuff like Picard down the line.
Star Trek Picard.
Now, I got to tell you, what's really sweet about the Picard thing. I mean, whatever. Yeah. I know people I know people aren't crazy about it, especially the diehard Star Trek fans.
Star Trek Picard is neither Star Trek nor Picard.
I know our betters are some of our betters. I'm not talking Mr. Plink. He's not even our stratosphere, but our betters are very down on Picard.
Right.
I know some people who love it, but for the most part, it's been pretty negative. Like diehard Star. Anyway, so it's Bernard working with a premise, but what's really sweet about it to me is again he's going back to his next generation roots that started his whole career. You know, like since the writing contest, he's kind of going back to working on a Picard show, which is nice. He's a full-on writer. He's not just the intern anymore. He's writing it, man. He's writing Picard, and yeah, it's. I
feel bad though. I feel bad because of the fanboy backlash. It's like he's finally getting solid writing work on. I'm sorry, I don't mean to ruin the moment here, Drag, but it is kind of like a double-sided coin here, where it's like, he's finally getting solid writing work on a franchise that he grew up with, and the reaction is not great.
And you know what? I mean, Tiki, look, I'm completely a layman when it comes to Star Trek. Star Trek,
Oh my god.
I could tell. I mean, the most Star Trek I could tell you about is the Orville.
That joke that you did about Jason Bourne, I can probably repeat about Star Trek. Honestly, it's like, all right, I know the guys in the red shirts die. I know that it's mostly diplomatic, exploratory missions, and then I know that the Borg assimilates people.
I mean, I can tell you
that's pretty much about it.
Basically, my knowledge of Star Trek extends to the documentaries. That's as much as far as I can go with. I can tell you behind the scenes about Star Trek. I can tell you maybe a few episodes.
And I know that McCoy and Shatner have a fun banter with each other.
Yes. I mean, I guess to be fair, I did watch. I saw the first of the new Star Trek movies. That's about as far as I can.
Same.
Anyway, my point is, I mean, just looking at that.
I also saw the Star Trek with Tom Hardy. I hadn't. What?
No, sorry, go on.
Oh, I saw the Star Trek movie with Tom Hardy, and I knew nothing about Star Trek, and I had no idea what the hell was going on. Anyways, go ahead.
Looking at Picard, I mean, I remember Picard had impressive trailers, and really had really impressive trailers. I mean, to the layman, it looks like there's a lot of, just to the very base level, looks like we're getting some great performances, you know?
Sure. Alright. So, finally we transition into Marc, the podcaster.
Yeah, this is the good part.
So, of course, this is kind of coming full circle to where you and I were introduced to him. He got hooked up with Kevin Smith through Fat Man on Batman, and, hey, what do you know? Just just like Todd from BoJack Horseman, he just kind of stuck around, Dragon. He just kind of became a fixture in the place.
You want to know how they met?
Yeah, do tell.
Okay, so it's really fun. It's very Todd-esque from BoJack Horseman. Now that I think about it, when you
how did I know that it was going to be Todd-esque? How did I make that call?
so what happens is, he met Kevin Smith during his Entertainment Weekly days, where again it's kind of the next point for a lot of the celebrity crossovers with Marc and the industry.
You know what's funny is that his wife was a journalist. His partner in crime right now is a journalist.
Yep.
Kevin Smith attracts the journalist, Dragon.
That he does. So basically, he's Bernard was tasked with doing an article on superhero costumes, and he kind of posited, why don't we ask Kevin Smith? So it's kind of that's the beginning of it, and then it kind of leads to a series of these crossover meetings of.
This sounds like a making of a buddy comedy biopic, Dragon.
Pretty much, this kind
of. My Weekend with Kevin.
See, now I'm just thinking about Tuesdays.
You laugh, but we're gonna pitch that eventually now.
Oh God. Anyway. God. Okay, we're all right. So there's just kind of these series of kind of these crossover kind of chance meetings over the years. Like a year and a half later, Zack and Miri comes out. So he's kind of covering that, which kind of leads to the next crossover. And then kind of after that, kind of I assume after he's doing an article on Zack and Miri and such, they kind of hang out together. It's like Kevin Smith after the interview or something, he invites him to play poker, which Kevin Smith did a lot of, like, in the back of the secret stash, there's a poker table. So, poker.
Yeah,
He and Affleck played pokers. They've actually entered tournaments and stuff. So,
oh my god.
yeah. So they're kind of hanging out and playing poker, and they're watching movies together. Just kind of hanging out relatively. Again, it's pretty much becomes Todd on his couch for not all the time. Jason Mewes is the real Todd. Let's be honest.
Oh, of course, naturally, yeah.
But speaking of the whole show,
Jason Mewes would be offended if anyone took over the Todd role.
Right. But it's to me, it's always been kind of cute that Kevin Smith has Ralph Garman and Marc Bernardin as kind of his LA sort of like geeky playmates. Like, these are the guys who love the same things that he does. And he kind of talk to them whenever he wants to, and then they kind of form these podcasts together. Where Ralph Garman with Hollywood Babylon, he was a radio guy, not journalism, but the next best thing, and the showbiz beat and such. And then you have Marc Bernardin, where they can really go deep on a lot of things, and Kevin Smith just like talking to him, and it's just like a kind of an out of the blue podcast invite for Fat Man on Batman with the Dark Knight Returns commentary. That was the first one, and then the Marc Bernardin jokes about this so wonderfully that there's this running gag with them every time. Like, the way their relationship works is that out of the blue, Kevin Smith will say, "Hey man, you want to do this? You want to do this podcast?"
Right.
And, Kev. It's like, "Hey man, sure, Kev." It's like, "Hey, you want to do this Dark Knight Returns commentary?" To like, "Hey man, you want to do commentaries on all the Batman movies?" Like, "Sure, Kev. Hey, you want to?" I'm going to restructure Fat Man on Batman to like Fat Man Beyond. You want to co-host on it? So, "Sure, Kev." To hey, you want to do like a live show in the Scum and Villainy Cantina of our established show? Do the Q&A segment and everything? "Sure, Kev." That's how it goes.
Adorable.
It is, and anyway, so Bernardin, he's on the podcast, and he actually starts his own podcast with one of his other sci-fi buddies, with Trisha Helfer from who was on Battlestar Galactica. They do the Battlestar Galactica together. So yeah.
Yeah, Battlestar Galactica is not something I can wrap my head around, but I'm sure it's good.
Yeah, but again, it's nice that he's like carving out his own.
Is it mostly like classic Galactica or reboot Galactica, Dragon? Do you know?
Is there a reboot Galactica?
Yeah, there's a reboot Galactica. That's what Katie Sackhoff came from.
Oh well, here's the thing. She's been on that show, so I mean, that's the thing. I'm going to imagine it's from the beginning, but probably if I'm a betting man, at least whenever Trisha Helfer came into it. So probably maybe the reboot in that case. I don't know.
Okay.
I've met Trisha Helfer, by the way, briefly. She's really nice.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, yes. So the point being, he started his own podcast. That's kind of where we're at with him in the podcasting view. So let's talk some highlights with Marc Bernardin, some favorite moments, some big moments, if you will.
Yeah, so he basically encouraged Lindelof to do the Watchmen show, and I kind of agree with his assessment. It's like, basically, Dragon, I picture it going down like this in my own little like fanboy of The Leftovers mind. I picture Bernardin just being like, "Bro, you did The Leftovers, bro. You're good."
Right, maybe a little less bro-y, but sure. Yeah, essentially what happened is Lindelof, as he should have, he had great reservations about, oh God, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if Alan Moore doesn't want me to tell this story. He doesn't want anyone to tell this story.
No, definitely not. I
mean, do I have any right to tell this, especially when it's already been done in a movie, and then like all this, and as a comic, I mean, why the heck should I retell this story? And
infamously bad prequel comics.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It's like people have tried and failed better than I. And so he's basically asking his buddy who's interviewed him probably for The Leftovers and everything else before with Bernardin.
Do you know Kevin Smith is a Leftovers fan?
You know what? It's come up probably through Bernardin. I don't know if Kevin Smith, I mean, there's a chance he could have, but I don't know. Okay. I know Kevin Smith watched a little bit of Lost. I assume he finished Lost, so anyway,
just fucking walked so the Leftovers could run, Dragon.
Anyway, so my point is, so he's asking, hey, you think I should do this? And Bernardin says no, but if they're going to do it, and HBO is going to make this show whether you're on it or not. So you again, knowing your background, The Leftovers and everything. I'm throwing that.
It's not like you just created one of the best TV shows of all time or anything. Just saying factually, objectively.
No, but like awesomely is quite simply, Bernard put it like you have experience in TV, plus you're a fan of the comic. You know where the bombs are. You know what to avoid. So it's in your
Also, Lost. Like, Lost
yeah,
was a great experience, a great learning experience for Lindelof and what not to
yeah.
do. Like, Lost is fantastic. There's a lot of stuff I still love about Lost, but I will not deny its faults.
Yeah, so in that regard, it's like you're experienced at this point. Plus, you're a
Uh-huh.
fan of the book, which is who you want running a Watchmen show. So
Sure,
if anyone's
sure.
gonna take it's your responsibility pretty much to take this on.
Again, I'm gonna wager and say that fucking Snyder was not necessarily a fan of the book in the way that you want someone adapting Watchmen to be a fan of the book. Does that
I
make sense?
Well, I mean, Tiki, that's more complicated. Again, Snyder's good at adapting things, but when he does his original stuff, that's when it's like,
I'm just saying, like in interviews, like the way that he's taken some of the material, I don't know.
well, I mean, now it's gotten a lot worse. I don't know. In 2009, Zack Snyder might have been more together than he is now, but I don't know.
No, I'm saying interviews that he did back in 2009 about Watchmen. Like I'm saying, like way back when it was, kind of like he was for the glorification of violence for Rorschach and thought it was badass.
All right, no, now you bring that up. I mean, here's the thing. I'm just looking at like through the commentary. He's a lot. He made actual points on the commentary versus like the crazy man commentary he did
What?
in quarantine.
I don't dare. I don't dare listen to the crazy man commentaries, Dragon. Oh
He did
God.
like this crazy man commentary for. I mean, Man of Steel, I guess, was okay, but when he did that BVS, it was crazy.
Oh dear. Oh, I could only imagine.
I
Did he
mean,
mention anything about Batman being raped in prison?
he didn't use those exact words, but I
Oh,
mean,
God.
about as he basically. We don't have time to get into it. Okay, let me refocus here. Okay, again, it's something you have to watch to believe. To
Oh, now I'm curious. Now you've got my morbid curiosity.
all right, so but again, the important takeaway, and again, the Black history of it all too, is that Lindelof. This leads to Lindelof to really think about the Tulsa story, which like, hey, Lindelof does this show that he puts a huge spotlight on an event that was lost to history within Black history, with the Tulsa massacre, the Black Wall Street revolt. No one was talking about that. Bernard not giving him the okay or giving like the encouragement. We probably don't get that Tulsa story, man. That's huge.
Uh-huh.
So I mean, in general, Black Man there's Fat Man Beyond, and then when Kevin Smith's away, when he's doing a movie or something, Marc Bernardin has the reins of the show, which it then turns into Black Man Beyond, which is also pretty awesome. Where he has some great black talent on, like Phil Lamar, Kari Payton, and like they remember when Black Panther came out, they had like a little Black Panther round table. A lot of like people within the industry really loved the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the coolest thing I saw, I think my favorite thing podcasting wise that he's done was the Spider Verse kind of conversation with Kevin Smith. Because think about it, Marc Bernardin, despite having a role in the creation of Miles Morales, never really kept up with the character because he's been busy writing and doing other things.
I mean, it makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
So when that movie comes out, that's him really learning about Miles. I mean, he knew a little bit about him, but he never read the books
It's kind of
religiously.
like his little genesis of an idea has blossomed into like a wonderkin of a gifted child.
I mean, think about how wonderful a year 2018 was for Bernardin, because you open the year with Black Panther and then you end the year with Spider-Verse, and like two Marvel movies that kind of really changed the game and did these wonderful representations of these black characters. It was really huge for him. It was a really emotional high point for him. And again, he had a hand in one of those, which is really amazing.
Uh-huh.
Have you? Okay, let's talk about A Door in the Distant.
Yeah, so I don't know much about this, but I'm interested in it just because of the autism coding like that. That is very much something that I'm interested in terms of like how people write about that experience and what they kind of take away from it. So I am very curious about this thing.
Yeah, so just to kind of give it a little bit of context. So over the years, Bernardin's kind of talked about. I've always loved it on the podcast when he would brought up like his connection. Whenever a Pixar movie came up, he would bring up kind of his anecdotes in the history of the Pixar films, which through his kids.
Uh-huh.
Where his kids, his Sophie and Luke, I believe, are the kids' names. Luke, not named after Luke Skywalker, ironically, just different Luke. Would be funny. He took him to see Finding Nemo, and his daughter, who was on the spectrum, it was like the only movie, like one of the first times ever, she she memorizes that movie. She loved that movie.
Nice.
Like, she completely
Nice.
she's so immersed in that movie, and it really kind of it struck a chord with her. It's her favorite movie ever. So Bernard's always has a special relationship with Pixar, mainly through Finding Nemo. And so anytime the other movies come out, it always kind of goes back to that moment. And so when A Door in the Distance happens, so down the line, a couple of years down the line, he kind of wants to do this tribute to his daughter, which essentially is this we have an autistic lead character who is a little girl, and basically, from what I understand, I haven't read it either, unfortunately, but the premise sounds insanely good. We kind of have this imaginative portrayal of autism through a child's lens and kind of this fantasy kind of blending into the real world, I guess. And
yeah, when you describe it, I'm thinking it sounds very Terabithia-esque when you describe it.
Yeah.
Which honestly, Terabithia could have had some autism coding in it as well.
Yeah, but this is like not even coding. This is like literally that's what the story.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I shouldn't be using the word coding when it comes to his daughter. Yeah, you're right.
And that's the thing. So I love that what Bernardin's perspective here is that like the big thing in making this book happen is that it's like usually when you do a story about like a kid with autism, it's usually you do like a portrayal of like it's the parent's struggle in raising the kid, or it's the parent's struggle in dealing with this, or whatnot. Where Bernardin
it's a legit way to go about it. The curious incident of the dog in the nighttime went about it that way, and it was fucking really powerful. But yeah, I think the more interesting way to go about it, like you said, is through the lens of the kid itself, and that's why Lilo and Stitch, of course, resonates so much with me.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's the he didn't take, and I'm not saying this is like a less interesting way, but he didn't take the easier way. Where again, you have a built-in like, okay, parents dealing with a difficult situation. That's it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. But again, doing it through like what is a kid's perspective like through this, and especially in kind of a compelling narrative way. So it sounds again Bernard being a good parent is kind of putting the kid, because he basically, as a parent, the way he's kind of framed it is like, as a parent, you put the kid's perspective before your own. So that's kind of how we did the story, which sounds really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Last thing I want to bring up before we just get into kind of we round things up here. Have you ever noticed? Have you ever seen the Q&As on Fat Man Beyond or Fat Man Batman?
I honestly, Dragon Kevin Smith's podcast repertoire is so vast. I struggle to keep up. So no, I can't say that I have.
Well, now that the show's live, you don't see this as much, but for a long stretch, and we say a lot of glowing things about Marc Bernardin. This is not a negative thing at all. I just want to get that in there. Is that I've always had this nickname for something Marc Bernardin does during the Q&As. He has resting Mark face. So resting Mark face is like back when they did shows at the bar and they have Q&A. Sometimes you get a sense that some of the questions were maybe a little beneath Marc Bernardin. I'm not saying he was judging people necessarily, but knowing how clever this guy is, it's like sometimes just kind of sitting there and it's like sometimes you have struggling questions. Not all questions are gold, and they have to turn them into gold. And you just see like Mark gives that look sometimes of like it's whether he's like he's the smart Ben Urich guy in the room, or he's just like, okay, let's have this guy get through his question. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like the wise man who's seen it all. It's just kind of funny. Like it hasn't done as much now, but it's always been kind of like resting Mark face. There it is.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So let's talk the man's impact at the end of the day here. Impact on the culture at large.
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically and this is a pretty big demographic that has kind of like come out in waves in recent years. The African American nerd community, which, it's a niche community, but it's also an impactful community. Dragon, I would say this guy is probably like the Kevin Smith of that community. Is it fair to say?
Yes, I use the nickname for it. It's he's the Kevin Smith of the blurred world.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
and
kind of a nickname they have black nerds are blurred.
Yeah, yes, I know. But I think it's just so serendipitous that he and Kevin Smith are like best buddies now, and because I feel like they come from relatively similar backgrounds, but they have they have similar careers, but also very wildly different careers, and I don't know. It's like you said, Dragon, right at the top. It's like they bounce off each other really well. Like Kevin is the bright-eyed optimist, and then Mark is kind of like the guy who's sort of been around the block, who's seen it all, who likes to keep it real. So, at the end of the day, I mean, I think his contribution, I feel like he's going to be just like one of these unsung heroes of pop culture where his name's not going to get brought up a whole heck of a lot. I don't necessarily think he's like, an iconic figure per se, But man, I mean, between the Miles Morales stuff and just his own work and just treading the groundwork for for Comic-Con to be represented in the media and the podcast. I mean, this dude is just very much. I can't think of any way else to put it, Dragon. He's a man of many hats.
Yeah, absolutely. I concur full-heartedly. That again, he's become the Kevin Smith of the blurred world. Or I mean, I forget if I've seen there's a podcast they did an interview for this, like the Nerds of Color. I forget if that's another like name for the group as well, where it's like another like faction of like just kind of like a group of people who's like love the representation and so on and so forth, which is really cool. But that's the thing, Tiki. I love that people are starting to take notice of the talented writer that's been under their nose the whole time, with both in the industry and just like the fan perspective. Like, yeah, who's writing all these? Who's coming up with all these good ideas? Marc Bernardin. It's a shame the man's name is not big because again he's done so much. He's written so much stuff, but again he's kind of gotten like he's not. I want to just give like a little feather in the cap here, of many hats. Is that Bernardin is not. He's not throwing. I was the inspiration behind Miles Morales. He's not throwing that out there. He's not. He doesn't claim that at all because again it's Bendis. But again he lit the fire. He lit the flame. He kind of put it out there. Well, he asked the question of why, which is big. And his relationship with Kevin Smith, it's bore a lot of fruit. It's kind of put him out there in the world. Look at Motu. That's the shorthand for it. So the next thing Bernard's doing, Kevin Smith's doing the animated He-Man Masters of the Universe show, Revelations, on Netflix, which is supposed to come out this year, I think. And Bernard's writing a couple episodes on it. And it's really nice because he also has a love of Conan the Barbarian, which definitely has some links to kind of Masters of the Universe. So it's kind of like it's kind of the snake can eat its tail, and the man's childhood kind of like coming to life in his career years later. He got to do what he loved in life, and I think the most positive impact that he's brought people together. He brought people together during the pandemic with the Plague Nerdologues in a way that in some way he's kind of. This might be trying to be all philosophizing on it or so, but so be it. Is that in a way, we become the same no matter what the race, creed, or status is. Whether it be celebrity or just kind of average Joe, because everyone comes together over something they love, over something that they're really fond of, over something they kind of fan out over. And that's kind of what that did, and that's kind of what Bernardin put forward. The man's got years in Hollywood, and again, it's the hope that that Hollywood's going to start taking the man's brilliant ideas. Like he's just kind of putting out there for free all the time. Like, hey, the man's got a lot of great ideas. Let's use that. It's like they're going to take those ideas seriously. He could be the next Kevin Smith, maybe even better. He's kind of like young Kevin Smith in a way. He's kind of hungry for stories, like Kevin Smith. In the early days, the guy hungry for the industry. The man like saying, "Well, what about the tee-hee?" That Kevin Smith. Mm-hmm. He's again, he's contributed to Black history in many ways. Just look at Watchmen or the Miles Morales of it all in these small ways, but had big impacts. Again, it's all of this through just talking what ifs. Basically, talking what ifs can be a powerful thing, and sometimes words are enough. And how appropriate that these words come from a writer. That the writer be the author of the words that change the world. It's kind of nice.
Yeah. Okay, well said, my friend. All right, that's all for now, folks. Until next time, when we look at the next inspirational figure who showed us that the world's not simply black or white, but brimming with color as well as character.
On the next installment of Black History Heroes.